2,000 years later.
It's not working. I'm trying to hack his fucking eyes.
Let's get out of here, Effie.
Oh, he exploded in many directions. Did I do that? If language being communicated was a success, if it was communicated, which is almost certainly not gonna be in certain situations. Fuck off with the I do be. Oh no, you fuck right off. You no. No. No! Just stand up and stab him in the foot. Yes! Who is your father now, child? Yes, I'm never playing this stupid game again. It's done. Fuck you, Radon. Fuck you, Starscold.
Before we begin, the Gamer's Advocate would like to remind you that any episode could contain game spoilers, so watch or listen with discretion. And now your hosts, AMKomnenos, Banana, and Legion. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to yet another Gamer's Advocate podcast. We are joined with AMKomnenos and Banana Hammock Republic. Hello, guys. Good morning. It's early morning here. Afternoon, calm, I think.
Yep.
Good to see you guys. And I wanted to mention before I forget, Com is now doing a Let's Play. Banana has been doing a Let's Play of Final Fantasy, and I think it should be done by the time this gets released, but...
I mean, it's done by the time we're recording this. It finished yesterday.
Yeah. Well, that would imply that I watched it, so...
I would hope it's done by the time this is released.
It says finale in such big letters on the thumbnail and the title.
Is that what it said?
Sure does.
Conclusion, dramatic conclusion to the Final Fantasy Tactics Let's Play that Banana did. And I think Com is also doing a Final Fantasy series afterwards as well. So
You've seen one.
Well, I love that you have none of the information, but you decided to take it on yourself to advertise the two Let's Plays. Like, you could have just asked us to talk about the things that we did, but no, you'd rather get the details wrong.
Hey, Banana, what was your Let's Play about?
Cobb's playing some fucking video. Go watch.
Please.
It's like the amount of effort we're willing to put into advertising.
Fantasy Future or something? I don't know. Chocobos. We recently did an Epic Moments in Gaming, and I think some of us kind of got onto noticing that there are some games that are open world, or not open world gaming. I don't want to give the wrong impression, but how some games seem to be a little bit too long in their duration. They outlive their welcome. I know, talking to Com in the past, he said, Dave the Diver for him was a great game until it wasn't. Things like, for me, Red Dead Redemption 2, open world game, didn't really outstay its welcome, but there sure is so much to do that you keep finding that it's like, at some point, I'm going to have to advance this story. And at that time, if you're kind of done playing with the game, that's where it becomes, not interesting anymore. And like I said, so open world is kind of one of those dangerous type of games that tends to approach that situation too long. Star Wars Outlaws, for me recently, that's one of those games you have to keep playing over and over to kind of remember where you're at and what you're doing, because there's so much to do, and a lot of it's, even though you're on different planets doing different things, there's a lot of things that are similar enough that you're like, I think I've played this game, even though I haven't finished it. I think I'm done playing this game. So, any examples that you guys can think of games that have been too long, overstayed their welcome?
Yeah, are we looking for specific examples then, or are we also trying to establish why we think they last too long?
Both.
Bit of both?
I think a little bit of both, yeah.
Yeah, I think both makes the most sense.
Well, I've had quite a few. And I think this is one of the side effects of just aging and having a bit less time to play video games and having other things going on. And maybe not always finding yourself in a position where you can dedicate enough time to playing a game that's going to demand a lot of your time. Because I find most of my gaming sessions now takes place in 1 hour, 1 hour and a half windows, and that's about it. And it's really hard to keep coming back to a game 45 times over and over and over every single night. That feels very different. If you play an hour of a game 7 days a week, it's such a different feeling to playing it once for 7 hours. If you really loved it, you play that 7-hour session and you think, oh yeah, let's go. What's next? Good night's sleep. Let's get back on. But in the other one, it's been a week already and you're still playing the same game and you're probably in the same area. So a game that specifically for me, I think has lasted way too long and I've stopped having fun. And it was a game that I expected so much more from. So it just slightly disappointed too. Nothing terrible, but it wasn't where it should have been, is Metaphor Refantazio. And I think that studio is tremendous. Atlas have done some amazing games. The Shin Megami Tensei games are outstanding. Persona 5, and particularly its remake, I think are some of the best games that have been released ever. Persona 4, outstanding as well. And there's everything about this that I should like. I really should. But something about it just got very boring. And it didn't take that long. I think about 30 hours in, I was already thinking, okay, we need to be coming near to the end now. But I know what these games are like. Persona's what, 80 hours, 100 hours? Shin Megami Tensei, not much shorter than that. They make these enormous games. And I think this is the one where, for me personally, they didn't quite land it. So the very specific example right now for me is Metaphor Refantazio. And it was so disappointed because I wanted more. I wait for that studio to release things so that I can play them. And I wish this one hadn't let me down.
Yeah, I will say that series can be done shorter. It's just a matter of, you always feel like you're missing out if you accomplish a lot of things too fast, or if you skip a lot of things. But there's a lot of the main story stuff that can be done a little bit faster.
Well, I go about as quick as you possibly can. So, I mean, you have a calendar system throughout the game where, on a rough terms, during the day you might do a mission, and during the night you'll go and speak to someone. You do your social simulator. It's not quite how it works, but it's that kind of thing.
Right.
Well, no matter what, you have to get through the amount of time that the game gives you. So in the case of Persona, you need the whole school year. So you're going to be doing 6 months, 7 months, whatever it is, and you have to do every single one of those days. Time immediately starts adding up because you can only get through that so damn quickly. And there's a lot of dialogue that you're just going to be sitting there clicking through. A lot of it not voiced, so you can kind of get through it quite quickly because you just read quick. But there's just so much. I thought, pardon me, that I was playing Persona 5 pretty quickly. I thought, going through dialogue quickly, not doing too much level grinding, just going through, being good enough. I think it was still 105 hours. You can get them a bit shorter, but you can never get them to be short. And Metaphor, I wasn't, again, not grinding, not spending too much time in places. I did a bit of grinding. But it just wore out its charm very, very quickly.
Yeah, Metaphor definitely has a lot of aspects that were, for me, since I wasn't familiar with the series with Persona as much. I mean, I have them, I've kind of played them, not all the way through. But I started seeing a lot of things in Metaphor. I was like, I know this. I played a lot of Honkai Star Rail, D&D. It was like everything merged. I was like, I know what this game is. I can piece this together. So I didn't spend as much time like having to learn the game. So from kind of a new player into it, it doesn't feel like it's dragging for someone who may have played Persona more often, I guess is what I'm saying. But yeah.
Yeah, I should say the first 20 hours I thought were fantastic. The 10 hours that followed that, I was already beginning to feel, okay, I think you need to pick up a bit. I know you're pacing yourself, but I think you need to pick this up a bit. And I wondered if actually they did try, but the moments just didn't land. And I know but a lot of people love the game. It's not a judgment on it generally, but for me,
the studio itself always seems to feel like it has to overly explain a lot of things. And you see that a lot.
Of dialogue.
A lot of dialogue. And there's like the tutorial system. It's like, make sure you hit next to do this and this. And then when you do that, then you'll be here. And then you do this. It's like, okay, you could have just told me that all I had to do was go to the menu and select those things.
It takes a very, I think this would be more of a banana reference, but it has a very Final Fantasy VIII tutorial You will learn, and you will learn now, and we will spend this time together.
Mhm.
Are you taking notes?
Yeah, I just started Persona 5 like a week ago. And I mean started. That's it. That's all I did. I didn't progress at all. I got through like the opening sequence, and then I was like, I'm not really feeling this. I'm gonna switch to another game. But that initial sequence is just so like, here's the basic functions of the game that you would only be unaware of if you've never played a video game before. And some people haven't, so like I appreciate that it's in there, but I'd love to be able to just be like, I have played a video game before. Can we move past all of this?
That's the thing I was talking about actually in the first episode of the Let's Play that Legion doesn't know I'm doing, is it would be good sometimes if there were an option, honestly, in most games, to almost have a "this is my first video game" button, where you can just for the first 10 minutes be told how to move, how to turn the camera, how to select items in a menu, but something that you can very easily bypass if that's not the situation with you. Just do you need a tutorial on the very basics? Persona, it will assume that you didn't, which to a degree I do appreciate, because there are people who will have this as their first game, but it can be very frustrating when you just want to get going, and you know that there's 100 hours ahead of you.
Yeah, that's something that's always bothered me with video games, because I'll go back and replay video games over and over again. And when you have those tutorial sequences that either like lock you in a gameplay sequence where like you have to proceed through each of these steps to get out of the tutorial, and it's not skippable, that drives me nuts. Because you're basically just saying like, you're not supposed to play this game more than once. What are you doing?
Yeah, I think it's, for myself, it's something, and I don't know how correct this is, that I do associate more with Japanese games, but it might be an indicator of what I played when I was younger and what stuck with me. But recently I've been playing Tales of Arise, and it does the same thing. You'll go into a fight and you need to learn a new character's combat mechanics. It won't let you out until you do that. Until you do that exact thing, the enemy that you're fighting won't take any damage. You just have to hurt them in the exact way the game is telling you to do it with the character that they insist that you use. And that's something that I remember only in very, very certain and specific games. And for some reason, I seem to associate it more with Japanese studios.
Yeah, I picked up Black Myth Wukong again. It's not a super long game if you know what you're doing, but I can totally understand. Yeah, it's one of those. It's not an open world game. It's very linear, but the bosses, there's so many of them, and they tell the story through the bosses. But at the same time, your level at the moment is supposed to be somewhat accommodating to the boss until you realize you hit this wall. And you're either really good at the game and can get past that wall, or you're going to have to do a little bit more grinding to kind of advance, because it knows even if you get past this boss, the things behind it aren't going to be as easy to accomplish. So it tries to give you the options so that you can get your equipment upgraded, things like that. So that way, when you do finish that, you can kind of easily go into the next story without being encumbered by, I can't get through this area, you know. So it's trying to do that on purpose, but that one never really seemed like it was too long of a game. But by the time the third chapter is the third chapter is, I think, by far the largest, and you feel it. It's like, oh man, I'm here, I'm glad it's a new area. But I kind of cruised through the first two, and then you get through the third and you're finally done with it, you're in the fourth, I'm like, wow, that was all one chapter, you know. So it has that feeling, but then it picks up again, and it's kind of interesting that it kind of like has a slog feel, and then you kind of like cruise down till you get to the end. So it's kind of an interesting take on it.
I do wonder if there's a optimal length for games, because I'm looking now just very quickly at how long to beat, which I often use actually when I'm picking up a new game, as to whether or not I think there's any realistic chance that I'm going to finish this. And the thing I was thinking the other day was, I told myself in 2024 I'd play a whole bunch of games that I really wanted to play, and I would sort of catch up with them. And when I look back, I didn't. I played Rebirth, of course I did. I played quite a few individual games of Helldivers with friends. And that might have been it. Because time gets away from you. So if you suddenly tell me that a game is 60 hours long, unless I really want to play it, I'm probably not going to. And anytime I see a game that's 30 hours plus listed, the doubt comes into my head as to whether I should even bother picking that up in the first place. I think now I'm much more inclined to pick up any game that says between 10 and 15, 10, 20 hours. That to me would be a wonderful sweet spot. And I remember a lot of games that kind of had that kind of length or felt like they had that kind of length. If I go back a short while to the sort of PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 times, games that were about 15 hours, and it felt like a really good length just for a simple action adventure type game. The Uncharted series springs to mind. There was a pretty good King Kong game on the PS2, I think. That springs to mind. And they all just had this very similar action movie feel. But you knew you could be done in 2 or 3 gaming sessions. Or now at my age, more like sort of 2 weeks of short gaming sessions. So I wonder if there's something just about the length of games that can be off-putting to a certain sector of gamers.
I think, yeah, definitely for people in your position who have, other stuff going on, they have lives, that knowing that to get all the way through a game requires a certain investment of, say, like 60 hours. And that means you're not going to finish this game for months. That's definitely something, a meaningful indicator for a lot of people who are considering buying a game. I will say, like, the games that I've invested a substantial amount of time in beyond the like minimum to play through the game once, they still have pacing issues at times. They still drag, but it's not the overall time to complete it that I really cared about. It's in those moments where I'm, replaying through the game. Are you having me do stupid things that aren't fun, that artificially lengthen the game for no reason? And that's the stuff that really drives me nuts, when you're just arbitrarily slowing things down so I can't make progress. And one of the things that springs to mind is something that I've seen in so many video games over the years that I just can't fucking stand. And it is a playable sequence where your main character's movement is like a fraction of what it normally is, but you still have to guide them through whatever is happening in that moment. Mass Effect did this, I think, in every game. But it's just like, I get it. They're injured. They're moving slowly. I don't want to play this. Like, this section, I don't want to be in control. Because what just happened was probably some catastrophic event that I couldn't avoid. So it was beyond my control. And now I'm dealing with the aftermath of that. And part of that aftermath is my character just surveying the carnage in slow motion. Just make it a cutscene. Don't make me walk through this at 10% my regular movement speed. Just allow me to either put the controller down and just watch, or progress through at the speed I want to.
It's a strange one, because the 2 examples that come to mind, one is, and it's one specific example, one is Final Fantasy Remake, one is Mass Effect 3. So if I think of Mass Effect 3, the last hour and a half or whatever the game is, when you go up to the Citadel, that section, I remember walking through and actually really liking it, because I had that moment of, okay, the game is forcing me to slow down, but look where we are and how gross this is and how unpleasant this is. And that feeling of, I know our friend is just a little ways ahead and I want to go quicker, but I can't. And I appreciated the rising tension that it gave me when playing the game. And then I did the second playthrough and I just wanted to hurry the fuck up. And then the third, it was just beyond frustrating, because I just want to get there now, because this isn't that interesting anymore. This is interesting on time 1. It's not interesting now. And then the one that I have from Final Fantasy VII Remake, and you've mentioned there's quite a few of them actually through the game, and I'm trying to find that balance in my head between, I know some of these are hiding loading screens. I know they're not all hiding loading screens. And I think the one that isn't is at the very start. You are walking through fiery Midgar, post Mako Reactor 1, and you walk into our big silver-haired friend. And you're going to walk after him through the alleyways, and you go so slowly. And again, the first time, I was like, oh, that actually kind of cool, because he's in this moment of, like, is it your main character's brain is like, it's firing, it's overstimulated, he's lost. And then the second time it does my head in, and the third time it's incredibly frustrating. I just want to fucking get there. I'd love it in those sections, actually, if the game had a little press triangle to skip in the corner.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I mean when I say with the like make it a cutscene.
Yeah.
Because there are skippable cutscenes in that game, and they are exactly the same. They do the exact same thing that this sequence does. It communicates the backstory of the character. It sets a tone for what's going on. But for whatever reason, they're forcing you to very, very slowly navigate the alleyways of Midgar when you could just be watching this play out. And I don't understand why any dev studio would look at those sequences and say, no, we want the player controlling the main character in this moment, when what is available to them in terms of control is severely limited.
Yeah, that's the bizarre dichotomy, isn't it? It's we're giving you control over a situation that's out of your control.
Exactly.
Yeah, at what point? And it's a strange one, because like I said, I liked it. I quite liked walking through, but at the same time, I was just holding forward. I didn't take a moment to slow down and check what was around me. It was the game had slowed me down, therefore I was checking what was around me. So you probably could have done it in a cutscene, and like I said, for the second time or third time, that would have been a really great boon, because you could have just skipped the whole fucking thing to begin with and just jumped to the actual cutscene part at the end. Yeah, it is odd. And unless there is some technical reason why you're doing it, like we say, like to hide a loading screen,
the loading screen ones I appreciate.
Yeah, because I would prefer that than a plain black screen and now loading. But when it's not necessary and it is purely an artistic choice, it's very rare that I'm going to truly appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And certainly on the second playthrough.
If you're paying like $15, $20 for a game that you know you're going to get a good 60 hours from, you might say, hey, look, may not finish it right now, may not finish it even this year, but it's a pretty good deal for a good game that I know will, last me a while. Conversely, when you say like a game that's only like 10 or 12 hours, but let's say it's a good game, but it's 60, $70, I may not get that game, because now we're pushing. It's like, I'm going to get done with this pretty quick. Why don't I just wait till it goes on super sale?
I have a partial agreement there. For me, if I'm buying a game and I'm looking at the price to time comparison, I try not to, because I think it's just not that valuable. I will say a game is too short for me to buy. But I won't ever say, a game is long and it's cheap. This is a bonus in its favor. So for me, it only goes in that one direction. It will just be, if you tell me a game is 3 hours long, and some are, I'm not going to pay $70. And they didn't ask for it. I'm not going to pay $70 for Papers, Please. I'm not going to pay $70 for Oberdin. They are shorter. But it'll never work in its favor in the other way. Even if someone told me, okay, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it's amazing, you'll love it. It's 100 hours long and it's this price. I'm going to listen to everything except the it's 100 hours long part. That I really don't care.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the point I was making, where that time isn't really an accurate indication of how long you'll spend enjoying the game. It's how long you'll spend playing through that first experience. If there are huge parts of that first playthrough that are boring and uninteresting, you're going to be like, yeah, this game length is working against the devs in this moment, because I'm not interested in progressing. I'm not interested in investing more time in this sequence because it's not fun. But you can't get a, how many hours did you actually enjoy metric for these games. So it's always kind of a toss up when you see that, like, it takes like 35 hours to complete this. That's pretty significant time investment. But if it's 35 hours where the game is constantly kind of fresh and they're adding new things and you're progressing the entire time, that's a solid 35 hours. But if a game's 105 hours and it's only 35 hours of that fun, engaging gameplay, you're gonna be like, all right, well, I'm done. I'm not gonna throw another 70 hours at this game because it's not fun anymore.
Yeah, there's definitely games that are kind of in that nebulous category, like builder games. Hot Wheels goes on sale every once in a while for like $3, and you can get a lot out of that.
Mr.
For $3.
Moneybags over here.
Yeah, and Planet Coaster is another one that you can put tons and tons and tons of hours. I got thousands of hours in it. There's no real end game here. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, is that these are categorized different, so that way you can kind of see where the price point you're looking at. It's like, well, it's not really a factor at all, because we're not looking at it in terms of game time. I think a lot of what we're talking about is related specifically to how do you complete the game in probably more of an RPG mechanic, because even the action RTS stuff has stories to them, but a lot of people aren't playing it for the story per se.
Yeah,
So,
but I think the big difference would be a game that has a story and a narrative and you play through. It's how much time do you have to put into the game? Something like Planet Coaster or Age of Empires, SimCity, Civilization, that's how much time do you want to put in. They can go on forever, but how much time do you have to put in to get the full story and to come out crying at the end? That only affects certain other kind of games. And it's why, oddly enough, MMORPGs, they've sort of turned me off. It's not something I would ever really participate in, just because I know with their stories that they have. Final Fantasy XIV, apparently it's amazing, but I know I'm never going to play it, because I'm never going to put... How many hours is the base story? Probably... I mean, how many expansions are there? It's long enough.
I think that's the other thing with MMOs is there's never really a finish line.
Yeah.
The idea that there's a story that overarches all of the events of Final Fantasy XIV, and apparently it is a very good story. I don't know it, but from what I've heard, people are really enjoying that game and still really enjoying it. But the idea that you'll progress through that story and you'll reach various stopping points where the devs are working on the next expansion or whatever. And the idea that you'll just never get closure, you'll never get a satisfying ending. You might get the end of an arc and then the start of a new arc, but it's all the same characters involved, so it's never really ending the whole story. And I don't like endings overwhelmingly, but I do like closure, and I don't think you get that from an MMO.
Yeah, I've always heard something uncanny as well about MMOs when you're playing them, and every single player has gone through the big narrative, and now we're all in the same world. It's just uncanny. It feels a bit odd. And I know that every game that's true. If I play Final Fantasy X and you play Final Fantasy X, we did exactly the same story. But our Tidus, they're not in the same world. Yeah, they're in their own separate...
How it's pronounced?
I can see you typing. They're not in the same world, and it just feels very different. Whereas in MMO, it always just felt very uncanny that we share the same world and we've done the same story, and the same NPC is now telling us both that we're the savior. That I just find so odd.
Well, yeah, that's another thing with MMOs. The idea that, like, usually in RPGs, your main character, the playable character, is special somehow. And then you go to MMOs and it's 4 million players. They're all special. Like,
and somehow you feel less special.
Yeah.
Like, even in comparison to all the other equally special players.
well, I think that's why a lot of MMO players actually do enjoy the in-game, because not everybody's doing in-game, because that takes a special player to actually have coordinated that much. Other similarly minded individuals to gear up the way that they need to experience scenes that not everybody's going to see. So they'd actually feel special because they are special. They're not everybody's doing that type of content.
Still way too many for me.
Well, for me, the Star Wars, the Old Republic still holds up for me, mainly because it's really a single player game wrapped in an MMO. Because so much is just cutscene. There's so much voice dialogue, and it's, you may go in there, but you're not going to see like 5 or 10 other people go into that scene. It's a unique scene each time for the player character.
I also think that the Old Republic, from what I've seen of you play, doesn't have that quite like you're the only one kind of feel to it. Like, every kind of origin in the Old Republic kind of feels like you're somebody who's figuring out how to be special. You're not like suddenly like selected or anything like that. It's just some weird stuff happens to you. You try to make the best of it, and then the story progresses. But in games like, and I think they actually did that fairly well with Destiny, which is the MMO I guess I'm most familiar with. You are really just kind of like another person touched by the light in that series, and you end up becoming special because you just keep progressing through the story and like going on these missions and surviving. But I think that doesn't translate well to an MMO in certain cases where it's like, oh, these are the, the handful that made it through that sequence. And it's like, yeah, that was released a year ago. Everybody's done that now. We're not special though.
That's the tragic one with Destiny as well. As I remember when I started playing it, finding out that a whole bunch of the content didn't exist anymore. And that was a weird one, which did make my character feel almost second grade in comparison to people who'd been playing it before, because they'd done these quests, they'd saved these worlds, or whatever happened. I don't know. I didn't play it. And then now my character couldn't even do. So you did almost feel like you'd signed up for the army in 1946. Like you'd sort of missed everything taking place before. That's a World War II thing, if anyone doesn't know. You have signed up for this. Great, just checking. You've signed up to go and do this, and then actually you're in not a time of peace in Destiny, but this big campaign is now over, and you're sort of fighting with what's left and these next bits. And that just felt so disappointing, because
it was also really tough because that aspect of Destiny where they kind of abandon those older pieces of the game, it really destroyed whatever kind of immersion you built up in that game, because it very much came across as we don't want to have to maintain these assets. We don't want to bloat the game with these this excessive amount of data that's tied to stuff we're not using anymore. It's, worlds where things are no longer happening. So we're just going to remove it from the game. Like, it very much felt like a studio decision as opposed to like a story element playing out in the game.
Right. Yeah. You could feel like, when you loaded it up, like you say, the studio decision. So it was cold, bureaucratic. It was just, we need less gigabytes in the game.
Yeah.
And there was no way of, if you think of what World of Warcraft did when they had their sort of end times thing where the world got like all blown up and shit, or you think of what Final Fantasy 14 did where they completely reset the world and there was that narrative feeling for it. There was, oh shit, something big has happened. Now we all do new things. This was just, no, it's not there anymore.
And I think they did try to provide a narrative explanation for what happened.
Okay.
But there was so much discussion about removing those assets prior to that it was just like this is the cover your ass. Like, yeah, we debated making this decision to move this stuff for like 8 months. Then we finally removed it. And now we just kind of threw a patch on it to just be like, oh, here's why all of it's gone in the story. It just never felt like they did it right.
It's like the narrative of the why they'd done it, or the reality of why they'd done it, that already spread so widely that you weren't catching up by possibly doing this new story.
Yeah, it was almost impossible to ignore the discussion that the studio was having about sunsetting these assets, that when they released the in-game explanation, you were like, no, that's not why it happened. Shut up.
I know when Cataclysm dropped for World of Warcraft, I stopped playing at that point because, yes, they were trying to reinvent and say, hey, here's a new area. It's the same area as before. It's just different now. Like, I don't care. I stopped at Cataclysm. I never went back. I know Mass Effect for me, that y'all mentioned before, Mass Effect 2 specifically for me was too long. And I can break it down now in hindsight, but like the Jacob arc, I don't need Jacob's arc.
I don't need that character in this game.
I don't need the character. We didn't need it. And I do appreciate the fact that there are 2 parts to it. You clearly know where you're in the middle because you do have to go get the second set of team members. But then you're thinking, well, wait a minute. Now that I have the second set of team members, now I can suddenly start doing the loyalty quest for the first set of team members. But then I'm going to have to do the second set of loyalty quests for the second team members now too. So it never really feels like you've gotten over that. Okay, now we need to go figure out the collectors and whatever, because you're still building your team, but really what you're doing is just doing loyalty quests. So I think if they had gotten rid of maybe a couple, it's hard for me to say that, but yeah, it just seems like it's a couple, 2 or maybe 3 too many team members for me to have to worry about.
That kind of calls to something that I mentioned in the Let's Play of Final Fantasy Tactics. I think I've mentioned it when we talked about Baldur's Gate 3 before, and it's the idea of not really giving a game that involves multiple characters having different starting points for those characters. So in Baldur's Gate 3, you get through this tutorial, you can immediately recruit Shadowheart. You walk a little further down the beach, you can recruit Astarion. Cross over the Nautiloid, you can recruit Gale. And then you stumble into Lae'zel in a trap. All of those feel like they're immediately available. A little bit more effort, you meet Will. And then you go on your little adventure and you meet Karlach. Those feel like the starting characters for Baldur's Gate 3. And then as you progress much further into the game, you recruit Minthara in Act 2, Jaheira very, very late in Act 2, Minsk in Act 3. They feel like they're late additions to the party, and I enjoy those characters less as a result because they weren't around for most of the story. Final Fantasy Tactics, you can recruit Cloud 5 minutes before the final battle. Like it's just so late that I don't care. I'm not super excited about it when they join my team. Admittedly, I was super excited about it the first time it happened, but then I realized, like, oh, I have a level 1 character and we're about to go to the final boss. Woo, you're not coming.
You don't enjoy the flagship carrier of D&D, Minsk, the owner of Boo.
Flagship character. I still can't believe that comment.
I made a comment.
People have been playing D&D for 30 years who had no idea who Minsk was.
Yeah, this person made a video about, the Minsk in Baldur's Gate 3, and I was like, well, I'm not a huge fan. And I made a comment. It's like, I did like the video. I was like, I'm not a huge fan of Minsk, but I really, really enjoyed this video. And then like a year later, somebody makes a comment. How dare you not enjoy Minsk, the greatest D&D character of all time or something? I was like, what? Oh,
I'm surrounded by nerds. Complete nerds.
Yeah.
You might remember.
I'm not sure why that surprises you. You're on a gaming podcast.
Chocobo on a stick. Comment.
No. You might remember, oddly enough, on that exact same note, that I think in our rankings of Mass Effect 2 characters, we all said we loved Legion, but he got slightly knocked down just because of how late you meet him. And you don't really get to have that chance to spend that time with them. And yeah, and that's entirely true. It's something that I always felt feels really odd. Persona 5, you are going to meet characters as you're going through the game at these massive intervals. So you'll have your established party, and then 10 hours in, you're going to meet someone new, and then 25 hours in, someone new, and then 40 hours in, someone new. And there's someone you're getting in the very last months of the game. And bless her, she seems really sweet, but she was never in my party. Because why would she be? Right. I've just met you, and I've had a whole year with these gang, and this is my friends, and you're just kind of along for the ride. And it really, really harms it. And it just reminded me that Mass Effect 2, that we, I think, mostly hold the opinion, contrary to the Mass Effect community generally, that it's our least favorite Mass Effect. It's just the one that we feel suffers the most in some way. And I think the pacing of it is what I dislike. It is the way that it feels like you're just doing odd jobs rather than pursuing the collectors. And I know that you're pursuing the collectors by completing the odd jobs. I'm not completely obtuse. But it doesn't have that narrative push that I feel that 1 has and 3 definitely has. Because 3, of course, has that much more action movie speed to it, doesn't it? Whereas we have to deal with this now, and we're going to do it by following steps A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. Whereas Mass Effect 2 has more of that sort of tree approach to it. Whereas, well, we're here, we need to get to here, but first, which of these paths do we take?
Yeah, 2 is much more, well, it has that like impending, ominous feel. Whereas the Reapers are here in 3. Yeah. And you're dealing with it. Yeah. And you're just grateful that you're not having to deal with total cataclysm at any one point. So you're Absolutely. Like, I'm kind of glad that I can do this next mission because we're at stalemate at the moment. We're really not, but it feels like it. So it's not that it, how some games feel like, well, this is not very immersive because if the world's ending and I get to do this little side quest over here, I guess the world's not that bad. But Mass Effect, it's more like there's a reason why you're kind of putting on something because it's just the Reapers, and they actually have a lore reason for it because even the Protheans held them off for several hundred years, and I think Vigil says the eradication of an entire species is not something that's done overnight.
Okay.
So
I think that's you've definitely kind of gently brushed against a topic that I think needs to be included in this, and it's the idea of like artificially changing the pace of a game, and not matching the tone with that new pace. So this happens a lot for me in RPGs where something terrible has happened. So, you know, in Final Fantasy VII, the starting bombing mission, you have that like timer that's like, you need to get out of here because this place is about to explode. You don't want to be in the explosion. Obviously, there's a sense of urgency there, but it's an RPG. So you do want to check every corner in case there's some loot you could pick up. And those sequences infuriate me because devs seem to love hiding one-time items that you can only get in that moment in those sequences where it feels like you need to rush out of the burning building. And it's like, no. If you want me to look around and explore every little detail of this area, don't put a giant timer on the screen, because that tells me get the hell out of this area.
Yeah, that disconnect between the game and the language that the game is speaking to you with around you, it's a very real thing. It happens a lot. And it's a big reason actually nowadays when I tend to play a game which has something like that taking place, the buildings falling down around you or whatever, I just ignore it. And I just think, well, nothing's going to happen. I'm just going to look around and see if there's anything in these corners. And that sucks because it means that now multiple games doing this in a bad way have ruined the ability of future game developers to have a scene, where the roof is collapsing in on me and I've really got to get out of there and I've really got to feel tension. They've taken it away from them to even be able to do that.
That's, absolutely my frustration with this is because it became so pervasive that it's just an accepted feature of video games now. And it feels like when a game deviates from that, you're going to be like, well, I didn't know the timer was actually counting down. I thought I could just look around everywhere. I didn't know there was going to be consequences if I didn't prioritize leaving the explosion area.
And that's annoying because all of a sudden now I'm annoyed that the game developer was actually doing a really cool thing by having them say, no, the building was falling down. You really should have left.
Yeah, when the tone does match what's going on in the game, it feels wrong. You're like, well, okay, come on. How was I supposed to know that? Because everyone else has lied to you over the years. They were like, oh, get the hell out of here. We're all going to die. But also check all of these rooms. Take your time. Don't rush.
Oh, yeah, a little bit of fire. When's that ever killed anyone? It's just ridiculous. It doesn't feel right. This is probably the most we've ever taken something out on a video game ever. It's such a small thing. I thought of another one, by the way, Final Fantasy VII, the original. And it's not a moment, but it's Disc 3. So Disc 3, the entire foundation of Disc 3 of the original Final Fantasy VII is the big bad spell that's going to destroy the world has now been cast. Hurry the fuck up, get to the Northern Cave, stop that big spell meteor crashing into the earth. But
first,
you also have an airship.
Race chocobos for 400 hours.
But also, it's the first time as well, if I remember correctly, when the airship has the cool, fun music.
Yeah. Yep.
Prior to that, it's melancholy, but now, it's a party, baby. Let's go. And it's such an odd choice. And I get it. It's a bit like in Final Fantasy VI, where, okay, now we really have to go and stop Kefka. But first, do everything.
And it's funny because that's a very Final Fantasy thing. Because most of those games, and people have mentioned this in forums and really kind of laid into Square Enix, whatever it was at the time, for this characteristic of Final Fantasy games. They refer to them as hallway simulators, which is true for the vast majority of these games. The story progression is extraordinarily linear and confined for 90% of the game. And then you get to that last 10% and the world opens up. Meanwhile, the story has progressed to we're all going to die unless you go deal with this immediately stage. And this is the first time you get to go back and do whatever the hell you want. So the tone doesn't match up with your new freedom. It's like, oh, the meteor is falling towards the planet. We need to move and take care of this first. This needs to be our top priority. but also I really want to catch those chocobos.
And it is still the dialogue as well, very often. Like, if you go back to your home base, the dialogue of the characters in there will still be, let's get straight to that northern cave and kick his ass.
Yeah.
Hey, hold on, buddy. Hold on. We need to go to Wutai for the next 3 hours.
But did you notice that little garden on top of the mountain? Yeah, I need to figure out how to get in there.
Which means Chocobo Ranch.
Yep.
Oh, it's so good. I love it.
So there are some games that kind of like skirt the line between both, builder stuff and RPGs. And like, I was thinking Subnautica, because Subnautica, you're going to be signing up for a very long ride if you go all the way through. But I know the pressure for me initially was finding a radiation suit, or how to make a radiation suit, because I was like, I see this radiation thing. I know that's going to be important, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. So how do I deal with this? And I couldn't figure out how to make a radiation suit. It's like I got to find a tree for it. And when I found the tree for it, I was like, now I got to find the items. I have no idea where these items are. And so there's a certain like pressure that I felt with that. But it was one of those, like, if it kind of like got me into the building thing a little bit faster initially, I could probably feel like, okay, I can feel my way through this now. But the end game to Subnautica, because that does become an RPG when you're doing all this, is quite lengthy. I know several people who have played tons of Subnautica and never finished. But that's one of those things. It's like, it's kind of, the length of the game isn't nearly as indicative of their experiences with it, because they enjoyed what they did, and then parts of the game that they just said, no, I can't do this anymore. It's way too surreal and visceral for them, because of the ocean and the depth and the big spaces and big things and unknown, and it's just it's too much for them. But so the indication of how long it takes for you to do that game really is not a measuring stick for it, but it is a very long game in itself.
There are also games within this relevant to this discussion that are only brought up because of the type of player I am. So for me, the story of, say, like Warriors Orochi 3, you can get through that relatively quickly. I mean, it is going to be a little annoying in terms of like progression, because it's playing just through the story mode means that you progress extremely slowly, and there are other game modes you're supposed to play to just kind of grind your characters up. But the main story of that game goes by relatively quickly, and then because I am a completionist and wanted to get all of the achievements, played another 900 hours of that game to get everything. And that's one of those things that it's like, you can't fault the game because I wanted to go back and get all of the achievements. But at the same time, when a developer puts an achievement in a game that's just like, do this 5,000 times, why? If it's something that's challenging, I should only have to do it once. If it's something that's not challenging, don't put an achievement tied to it.
I am firmly of the belief that the side content in a game, if you think there's too much of it and you've binged yourself on it and now you have stopped enjoying the game for that reason, it's your fault, you as the player. However, I also think achievement design is a real thing. Because there are people who specifically want to go out and platinum these games. They want to go and get these trophies. And design of a platinum trophy, I think, is a part of the game design in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And if you do make these awfully difficult platinums that encourage players to no longer be having fun with your game, that's a flaw in your design process. You need to think of a way to make this hard. We don't want everyone to be able to get it, because it is a little special thing for those who want to. Because I don't want to go and get platinum trophies. On the other hand, you do. You should have to work for it a bit. Yeah, but not so much that you hate the fucking game.
There are definitely, so like there are trophies that kind of fall into this kind of endurance category almost, that I get things like collect all of these items, collect like, whatever collectibles there are in the game. Getting all of them is a very logical achievement. It's very much like we put all of these items in the game. They're pretty straightforward to get. You just might not notice them in your first playthrough. You might not have, the checklist at hand to know exactly where everything is. But collecting all of them seems like a reasonable request. And then you have those achievements that are similar, but kind of miss the point. And for me, that's a lot of those do this thing 500 times or whatever it is. And it's just like, Why? What if it's not something that is like I would much rather have an achievement that says do this thing once, and you might have to make 500 attempts because it's kind of challenging. It's not easy to get through. Then do this very easy thing 500 times.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a nice balance to find, because some of my very favorites, it's the trophies that I remember always being happy when they popped, was things like in Mass Effect, they do 20 warps or whatever it is, or pillar box. What do you call it? Like post box 10 guards when they got the shields and you want to go through the slot. That kind of, and you got to do like maybe mail slot. Yeah, you got to do like 10 of them maybe. It's a nice small number. That I like. And I used to like those and seeing it pop up and saying, you've done 5. You're halfway there.
Right.
But yeah, when it is dodge 100 lightning bolts in Final Fantasy 10.
200.
Oh, God. Well, point made. that is.
And yeah, that's absolutely it. The number is a huge part of that. 25 of those things in Mass Effect. You know, if you're playing a biotic character, you'll probably get the ones tied to biotic abilities just by playing the game, because you're going to be using those abilities. You might not set up the, biotic, what was it, combo, the explosion, whatever.
Yeah.
You might not trigger that as many times in a single playthrough, but like the game is just kind of encouraging you to use the skills at your disposal. And it says like 25 times, which is a very reasonable number in a single playthrough to get. And you have characters on your team who can help you make progress towards those. So like if you're not a tech character and you bring Tally with you and you use her overload, it still contributes towards that achievement progress. So like it's very much a reasonable request for them to say like, hey, play the game and use the abilities we put in the game a lot. Maybe not like maybe not the amount that you normally would, because if you bring Tally with you and then everybody has biotic shields, you're gonna be like, overload doesn't work as well on those, so I'm not gonna use it as much in this mission. And then you go to a tech mission and you didn't bring Tally with you, so now you have Miranda trying to use warp on just regular shields. It's like, all right, well that one's on me because I didn't really plan these. I didn't know what enemies I was going to go up against. But if that said do this 500 times, I'd be like, no.
Yeah, and that's when you're not even going to bother. You're not even going to open it. You're just going to say, well, whatever progress I make, great, but I'm not even going to think twice about it. Yeah. And I was just writing down, actually, it's the two things that for me would make the trophies enhance the longevity of a game. So they're going to make me want to play the game more. And it's, first of all, the trophies need to encourage my behavior. They need to encourage me to try different things. I don't want you to tell me to dodge lightning 200 times, but I do want you to make me bring along a tech specialist in Mass Effect that I might not maybe have brought along, just so I can test out those powers. Or maybe you want to make me try and have a second playthrough where I play as a biotic warrior or whatever, as opposed to an assault rifle person. Maybe you just want to push my behavior and give me those little extra rewards. I think that's a great thing for achievements to do, just to influence your behavior in a positive way and say, look, we've designed all these systems, go try them. And if you do, we'll give you a small reward. Mm-hmm. And the other thing was regarding the feasibility and the ability to actually complete the achievement lists. I want an achievement list, if I'm going to platinum a game, where it's one playthrough where I just play, and then I can do a second playthrough with a walkthrough and get the platinum.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that sweet spot. And technically that's always going to be true, because the walkthrough can just say, yeah, go here and dodge that lightning 200 times.
Right.
But I mean in a reasonable way.
Yeah.
Just with little detours. That's all I need.
And we've been talking about my playthrough with Remake recently, and I'm going back and doing some achievement hunting, and overwhelmingly, I think the achievements are well designed. There is one that drives me nuts, and it requires 3 playthroughs of specific chapters. It's to get the 9 available dresses. And the problem is the things that drive what dress you get for each character are not effectively communicated. So you'll do your first blind playthrough so you get the real experience of the game and not even know that each character has 3 different dress options. And then you'll go to the second playthrough and be like, all right, what achievements do I need? Oh shit, I don't know what dress Tifa was wearing in the previous playthrough, so now I have to do this 3 times. And if you're like me and stupidly just selected one of the options blindly in the playthrough, you end up getting the dress that you would get if you did none of the side quests in chapter 3, which means now you have to go back and do all of the side quests in chapter 3 to get those 2 other dress options. So you've artificially extended the amount of time you need to invest in the game.
But I think that's a perfect example, actually, of just the artificial lengthening of a game that is going to take away some of your joy. And worse than that, it's directly linked to the achievements and the trophies. So there's that extra frustration element added to it. If there was no trophy linked to seeing all of these available dresses, you might just think, oh, whatever, I won't bother. But when you really want that trophy,
you might be on the other side of that. There's no trophy tied to them. You might be like, oh, there are 9 options. I want to see all 9 of them. I'll do this on my own. At which point you're not being coerced into investing that time. You're making that decision on your own. But because there's an achievement and people like me, I'm like, oh, I have to do this now. I don't have to do it. I'm an idiot.
Yeah, and that's the odd thing, isn't it? You say like you're being coerced into it. You're absolutely not being coerced into it, but that is how it feels in the moment. And therefore it affects your enjoyment and how you feel about the game.
Gamers advocate, bold take, say yes to the dress.
Coercion is bad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think pacing has a lot to do with, as far as
more towards Cobb on that one.
Yeah, I think pacing does have a big influence on whether or not we think a game is too long or not, because, games like Inquisition has a great story attached to it, but the problem is that when you first initiate it, and of course it's an RPG, so a lot of people are going to try to do as much as they can when they have it in front of them. You don't have to complete the hinterlands. But something about an RPG is telling us we need to complete this area before we can move on to the next area. Otherwise, what if they close it behind us? We had that experience in Dragon Age Origins. We were in an area. If we didn't complete it after we left, we were not going back because it was destroyed behind us. So you do things like the hinterlands and you tend to overdo them because we don't really know at the time of the first playthrough what's going to happen to this area if we leave it now. So that one had a pacing problem because it didn't recognize it was an RPG and people were going to treat it like that, and they kind of just let the game extend itself in the hinterlands for way too long.
Well, it didn't effectively communicate the way that you should really think about approaching this, but they did it to themselves by putting in as many boring side quests as they did, because they should realize that people are going to do them. And they should have realized at the same time that even if they'd put up a message that said, please don't do this now, please go and do the story, please come back later if you want to, people would still have done it anyway. That game had multiple pacing issues. Mm-hmm. And I think, honestly, it's why, as a game, we look upon it so differently now, 9 years later, 10 years later, than when it first came out. Because now we look on it with a combination of the rose-tinted glasses, the nostalgia, but also we know how to play it better. Whereas on day one, like you said, we didn't know to move on from the hinterlands. The instincts were still there, clear all of these boring side quests. Whereas now, when you play it, I think every person you know who is a new player to the game, you say, oh, by the way, the hinterlands, don't do it all. Just advance. Keep going. And now we've got everyone who plays it now is sort of standing on the shoulders of giants who came before them. And we sacrificed our time in the hinterlands so that you don't have to on this new playthrough. And I wonder how much something like that, the fact that we play it better, plays a role in our reassessment of the game in these recent years. Because the praise that Inquisition gets online now is not the praise it was getting 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I think that is a huge part of pacing. The idea of conveyance in games, letting your players know what they need to be doing at any moment and when they can abandon something and still come back to it later if they want to. That is a huge, huge part of just generally pacing your game. And it's a game we've mentioned previously that Legion and I think, both appreciate, but was not well received in the moment. Zelda 2. That is a game that does a lot of very interesting stuff, took a lot of risks, brought a lot of new stuff into the Zelda series, and people hated it in the moment. But if you go back and replay that with a walkthrough, that game is wonderful. It's just the amount of time you needed to invest in the game to figure out things and how they worked in the world, or to just kind of randomly stumble into areas that are hidden, that are essential for progressing. like the first playthrough of that game for anybody who's done a blind playthrough is infuriating. There's so many times where you're just like, I don't know where I'm supposed to go. They told me Bagu lives in the forest, and I don't even know who Bagu is. And then you find out that there's one square in this sea of trees. And if you step on that square, you go into Bagu's cottage and you meet him. And you're like, how was I supposed to know that? How could I possibly have identified this one square that's identical to everything around it as being special? And it's one of those things that, like, this works because of when Zelda 2 was released. People were still figuring out how to make games, and they had just done something pretty incredible with the first Zelda game, that they were empowered to kind of take risks. And a big part of what the first Zelda game did was just throw you straight into it. You just show up in a world and go wander around. You kind of do that in Zelda 2, but it's so much more difficult to progress in that game. Everything is kind of linear, but it's not presented to you in a very linear way.
Yeah. When they say that his house is hidden in the forest, they literally hid it in the forest.
Yeah.
They took the literal term. You have to find it. It's hidden even to you. So you can't just like, oh, let me go straight there.
But from what that sounds like, you're not actually finding it. You're just stumbling across it by chance. It's not that you see it coming in the forest. You just happen to step on this one nondescript square, and now you've found it. It's not that you're solving riddles and puzzles as to where it might be. It's not that you're following the logic in your brain. It's just, oh, that was lucky.
Yeah, if they had given us like something like it's in the northern part of this forest. Well, we know it's in this section, even though the forest is this whatever. It covers this big area, and there's a swamp over there. And they said, hey, look just southeast of the swamp on the northern side of the forest. Then we could kind of, triangulate where we're supposed to be going. But the problem also is that when you're in the overworld map and you're not on a trail, you're always going to have a risk of these monsters randomly coming into you. And sometimes it's good because then you can like build up your XP and you can get stuff. But after a while, it's like, I just want to find the thing because these monsters constantly show up.
And what game does that really well? Morrowind does that really well. When you have to go and find the Azura's cave, and it says to you the little riddle, I did look it up. It's the eye of the needle lies in the teeth of the wind. The mouth of the cave lies in the skin of the pearl. The dream is the door. The star is the key. And we just can go around because that's not really anything for us to work with. We don't have the full context. But now when we go around and ask other people, they do give us more, but they don't tell us where it is. They don't mark it on the map. It's just, it's in a valley. Oh, and that probably refers to this massive rock formation that's there. And it can't be this valley because of ... Oh, and this must mean it's on the slopes of the mountain. Oh, and you must have to only go there between certain times of day. But you still have to walk that path. Mm-hmm. And you still have to see the first valley and think, oh, it can't be that one because it doesn't have those two rocks. And then you go in the one with the two spires and you think, it must be this one. But you keep on going and you're not sure. And there's just enough doubt in your mind because the valley keeps going of, this might not be the right place.
And that's something we've talked about with these Zelda games before, is the difference between like a riddle and fuck you, go find it.
Yeah.
It's the idea that when you're solving puzzles in Legend of Zelda, you're overwhelmingly, in the 2D games, overwhelmingly just presented with all of the information in a single screen. It's, hey, this is what you're working with. Use the tools at your disposal to interact with the environment and see if you can figure out how to solve this puzzle. But in Zelda 2, the puzzle is finding Bagu's house, and the information you're getting is Bagu lives in a forest. You're not given enough information to know what the solution is. You just know that there is a solution, and you just have to guess. And that's not a puzzle. That's just a time sink. That's just saying, go wander the forest and maybe you'll stumble into it.
Well, the needle in the haystack isn't a puzzle.
Yeah.
And it never has been. It's a patience tester.
Yeah. I think the Elder Scrolls has definitely done a good job of like saying, look, the pace isn't the story. It's the story's the story, and you tell the story however you want to. So Morrowind does a great job of that. Skyrim does a great job of that. Oblivion actually felt a little bit of pressure of moving the story along because of its the gates that show up, and you're like, I know I have to deal with this. They can't just keep showing up. You know, it was that whole like the Reapers are coming. Well, the Reapers are here type feel. Yeah. But yeah, I think the Elder Scrolls did a good job of saying the pace is your pace, and so it never felt like the story was too long or too short. So
that's where I disagree, because I think the only one that did was Morrowind. I thought Oblivion was much more. It was very imperative that you continued on, because you very specifically had the gates that were popping up, and at some point this was going to be a problem because you have random NPCs blocking the roads. But now there's scamps and Daedra hanging around. That's not good. And Skyrim, I just thought the tone didn't quite land. They're far too pressing in the dialogues attached to the main quest, and it feels world-ending because I can see dragons everywhere. And when you do that, I think it doesn't allow you to really quite settle in the way that Morrowind did, where they're very specifically, and they do sort of hammer the point home over time when they keep saying to you, just go and do other things for a while. Go and do other things. And even at the point I'm at now, where I need to be declared Portator by the 3 Grand Houses and Nerevar by the 4 great Ashlander groups, even that, the way it's presented to you is you need to have a reputation that means something to them. And even though you don't have to do what I'm doing, so I'm deciding to quit and I'm going to go and do side quests for a while because I think my character would do that. I want to present myself to these great houses. I need to be someone before I can do this. Apparently you don't have to. Apparently you can just go there, do a quest, and that's it. But it feels like you can, and it feels like your character would. Where there is times, particularly in Oblivion, but also in Skyrim, where I think, well, I'm going to go do this side quest, and I know I can, and I know nothing's going to happen. But I wouldn't do that if this was real. I'd be heading over to that barrow where the dragon is.
I will definitely say that Skyrim, the way the game works does break that immersion a little bit, because I think we've all kind of played through Skyrim and had that understanding of the main story, like, oh, there is a small sense of urgency here. Like the dragon attack at Helgen, it's like, all right, get to Whiterun, give them this warning so that they know what's going on. And that leads you into the next step where, oh, okay, I've got to go talk to the Greybeards because they summoned me. And there's always kind of this impetus to keep going with that story. But because of the way the game works, at a certain point, you're just like, I don't care anymore. I'm going to go do my own thing. And like, it destroys that immersion because you're very much like, I don't want to play that part of the game right now. You're making a very gamer decision. But at the same time, that's what the devs wanted you to do. That's why the game's pacing works the way it does. It's very much controlled by you. So like, it's done in a way that you'll eventually reach that point where you realize you are in control of the pacing, but it's only because you didn't want to continue with the pacing the game kind of laid out for you. You just got burned out on it and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore.
And it does very effectively let you do that. I adore Skyrim. I think it's a really, really fun game. It's great at what it does. The story's actually pretty good. I like most of the side questing. I love the world. I love the time spent in there. I love doing nothing in Skyrim. That's great too. It's just, there is that slight discordance between the impetus that the story tells you there is and the impetus that there actually is in the story. And like Banana said, the devs don't want you to go and do the main quest all the time, is the impression I get. They want you to go and have fun. That's why they put so much shit in the world. But the characters in the story do want you to go and do the main quest.
Yeah, it seems like the biggest decision you make in Skyrim is, do I join the Grey Cloaks or the Imperial? I have to, like, because there's a civil war going on within Skyrim. You're like, seems like that's the biggest decision I seem to, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. So.
I can't even remember.
You can basically win the war for one side or the other, but it doesn't affect the main story particularly much.
Oh, I think I remember actually.
You either have to like decide the war before moving forward with the main story, or tell everybody to fuck off and like knock it off for a bit while you deal with the dragon problem.
Well, I appreciate everybody being here. I think we talked long and hard about game pacing.
If you didn't laugh, it would have been fine.
But I don't know if
it would have been fine.
Would it?
No, it wouldn't have been.
We did Banana has done a Let's Play about, what was it again? What was that about? Final Fantasy something?
Final Fantasy Tactics, War of the Lions.
Check that one out. I think Com is supposed to be doing something about Final Fantasy, I think. So.
The first episode is out.
Give that a watch and like, subscribe, and every Friday we post a new podcast, and look out for that. We're on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Yeah. So check those out. See you later. Bye-bye.